Is there anyone you never got a chance to work with that you wish you could have?
When I first broke into wrestling, Kowalski was still wrestling every now and then, and he was always the main event. I was young,
Right.
but I would like to wrestle him because he trained me.
Right.
You know, I would like to wrestle him once. I never actually got to wrestle Hogan. We were on a lot of tours together, but I never actually got to wrestle him. I would like to have had a match with Hogan. And
What was he like outside the ring?
Hogan?
Yeah.
Super. Yeah, unbelievable. Nice to me. We did a WWF trip. It was a hard-ass trip we did. I think we did like 12 countries in 14 days or something. And it was just kind of a going-away deal and treated me really good. You know, I was new in WWF. I was a bottom guy, but he treated me like anybody else.
Right.
I'd never been around him that much. He signed autographs for a bunch of kids back home for me in my hometown and took pictures with me and signed them to this kid and to that kid and didn't blink an eye.
Huh.
You know, so for a guy who was the biggest star in the business, he was great.
All right. Did you ever want to write a book, maybe?
Yeah, I would actually. I would be interested in that. I think between the traveling and the characters I wrestled and the characters I had, and I was really shocked not too long ago how close some people follow wrestling. I had a guy from North Carolina send me a list of every name I ever used in the wrestling business.
Huh.
And one night in South Carolina, I had come back from an overseas trip, and I went to a wrestling show just to stop by and see the guys. The main event on the show was a guy that was supposed to be there named the Big O. He didn't show up. The promoter says, "Hey, do you want to work? I'm a guy short." So I worked as the Big O, and this guy knew that.
Wow.
One night. I don't know how the hell I know all this stuff.
Internet.
There's some people out there that put a lot of time into this stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's amazing what they know. But I would like to write a book sometime. You just don't know how honest you can be sometimes.
All right.
without hurting somebody.
What is your favorite road story?
Oh, favorite road story. That would have been somewhere in Calgary. The world's strongest man up there, Bill Kazmaier, who they ribbed till he almost committed suicide, I guess. And
Really?
they staged a fight there one night where two of the guys, Ron Ritchie and then Ben Bassarev, they were in the babyface van and they pulled over and were going to fight. And Kazmaier charged to break it up and slipped and fell down like this 20-foot hill. Came back up all soaking wet in mud. And then he wanted to fight one of the guys. And it was just unbelievable. Some of the stuff. Some of the road trips in Calgary, just unbelievable.
Right.
Yeah, it was.
Any good rib stories? Like, what is the greatest rib you've seen?
I think one of the most amazing things I could imagine was Dynamite Kid was the greatest ribber of all time, maybe him and Fuji, and he had that big Luke McMasters. He wrestled as Giant Haystacks, and he wrestled in Calgary as the Loch Ness Monster, 700 pounds, 6'11" or whatever. And he went in the bathroom to have a shit, and he would always fall asleep. No matter where he was, he'd fall asleep.
Right.
He wrecked like 20 cars falling asleep driving. It was like he wasn't killed. And he was in having a shit, and Dynamite sprayed a can of lighter fluid underneath the door and threw a match in there while he was in there.
Right.
700-pound guy trying to get up with his pants around his ankles, what the fuck's going on?
Right.
Flames and everything else. And Dynamite was brutal. He was brutal. Made cakes with baby shit in and give them to people. And it was brutal.
Would you ever go back to WWE if they ever called you to do a skit or anything?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah, as long as I could talk to Vince straight one-to-one and ask him what he wanted and what it was going to entail, and go in and do it and leave, and it'd be fine.
I guess, where were you when you found out that Owen Hart passed away?
I was home. I was in my house in Michigan, and my wife got a phone call from somebody in Calgary and said a wrestler had got killed. Didn't know who it was, and we got a couple of neighbors who are crazy wrestling fans, and they called her up, or my neighbor called. No, the story went, somebody from Calgary called and said that they thought Owen had got killed. And then somebody else called and said it wasn't Owen, that it was somebody else. And my neighbor called, who was a wrestling mark, and she said that she heard it was Owen. So it took us to the next morning to actually find out.
Wow.
100%.
Wow.
I didn't want to call Calgary and ask somebody.
Right.
He's the one who killed her.
Right.
And then I think one of the brothers finally did call the house, Bruce, or somebody called and said it was him. Yeah.
Do you have any regrets looking back on your career?
Getting back to Owen for 1 second, when they called my house, I had probably met I'm going to say 20,000 wrestlers in 20 years, different countries, every place else. A lot of them have died or committed suicide or overdoses or whatever. Not one of them ever fazed me, ever. When they called me Owen, told me Owen died, I cried like a baby. Just bothered me that it had to happen that way.
Right.
So, regrets in my career. Yeah, I got some regrets. I never really understood what they wanted me to do in WWF, so I think I blew that opportunity. I got big there. I got really heavy, close to 400 pounds, believing that's what they wanted that character to be. And I found out later they complained that I wasn't moving as well as they wanted me to, and I never had any real direction what they wanted with that thing because I don't think they cared.
Right.
But I have a regret that I waited that long to get in there and never got to perform the way I think I could have.
Jim Ross or any of those guys? I know they were big with Yokozuna and some of the other guys that got, they would tell them, lose some weight.
Yeah.
They never came to you? Or?
Never came to me and told me.
Okay.
I talked to Vince one time, and he never directly said it. He just said to me, he said, some of my best wrestlers are 250, 260, and he left it at that.
Right.
But nobody ever, I know with Yoko, they took him aside a couple of times, but nobody ever gave me that indication. Like I said, I actually thought that's what they wanted.
All right.
So the people who were supposed to be the bookers, Pat and those guys never had a minute of time for me ever. I don't think Pat ever had a conversation with me,
As far as the finishes and stuff like that, who would give you the finishes?
Usually the agent, whoever was on the road that night.
Right.
Who was George Steele or one of the Hebners, or I think one Hebner was an agent, one was rep at that time, and Tony Gurria, whoever was on the road would tell you. Arnold Skolin was on the road sometimes around New York. Yeah, that's usually who it was.
What were the Hebners like?
Good.
Good guys.
Yeah, they were good guys. I guess they had some kind of falling out there too, I guess. And
right.
I don't know what it was, something over T-shirts or something.
Merchandising and stuff like
that. But they were decent guys. Sure.
What is your number one highlight moment, if you were to say it?
Career?
In your career, yeah.
I guess it would have to be a toss-up between establishing the Mucka Singh character as hard as it got over in a limited territory. I mean, you're talking a small territory, and that thing got national magazine coverage, and I mean, it went as high as it could on our TV, and the level the Norman character got to.
Right.
I don't want to talk like a mark, but people are telling me the character was as popular as Sting and Luger and Hogan when it was hot, and just to have it killed off like that just didn't make sense.
Right.
It's a business. I thought they wanted to make money. And I'm not saying it was me. I mean, if you kill off anybody who's making any money, it's kind of dumb.
Watch thousands of exclusive shoot interviews right now on TitleMatchNetwork.com.